You're in the decade where money stops being math and starts being weight. This isn't about budgeting. It's about how your life quietly becomes too expensive. After 35, it's not one stupid purchase that traps you. It's the lifestyle you upgrade, piece by piece, until it needs your paycheck like oxygen. And the moment something wobbles, hours cut, kid expense, health thing, parent thing, your successful life turns into a pressure cooker. If you don't understand this, you don't lose money. You lose flexibility. Let me show you what I mean. I watched a guy in my neighborhood do the whole "I made it" speed run. New car that still smelled like plastic, bigger place with the kind of kitchen island you don't cook on, you just lean on and talk about hosting, weekend trips, nice clothes, the whole adult upgrade package. From the outside, it looked clean, like he finally beat the game. Then I saw him a few months later, standing in his driveway, on the phone, doing that slow pacing thing people do when they're trying to sound calm while their life is quietly on fire. Not yelling, not dramatic, just tight, like every sentence cost him something. And a few days after that, there was a moving truck. Not because they wanted to change, because the math changed. That's what nobody warns you about after you hit your mid-30s. You don't get taken out by one huge disaster. You get taken out by the fact that your life got heavier and you didn't build any margin underneath it. Because at 35 plus, your expenses stop being choices and start being commitments. It's not just rent or a mortgage. It's the insurance you can't skip, the car that has to work, the kid stuff you can't be the parent who cancels, the family member who needs help and you can't emotionally say no to, the health thing that shows up and suddenly you're paying a few hundred here and there just to feel normal again. And the scary part is, you can still look successful while this is happening. That's the decade split nobody talks about. From 35 to 45, two people can make the same money and live in the same city, and one of them becomes financially unbreakable, while the other becomes permanently anxious. Same income, different outcome. Not because one is smarter, because one protected their margin. Here's the clean definition, one time so we can move on. The margin mirage is when your paycheck gets bigger, so you feel like you have room, but your fixed costs expand faster than your safety. You're not actually safer. You're just operating a more expensive version of the same vulnerability. And the comfort contract is the part that makes it sticky. The quiet moment your upgrades stop being nice to have and become, this is just my life now. And once it's normal, downgrading doesn't feel like a financial choice. It feels like failure. That was just the setup. Here's the promise of this video. I'm going to take the most common belief people have about getting rich after 35. This idea that you can just earn more and everything will sort itself out. And I'm going to mathematically destroy it with one simple breakdown. Not spreadsheets, not hustle propaganda, actual reality. And by the end, you'll know what this decade is really deciding. Whether you end up with freedom, or you end up with a life that costs more than expected to maintain, forever. And this is where people get defensive. Quick gut check before we go further. If your income dipped for a few months, nothing dramatic, just work got weird, what breaks first? Your savings? Your sanity? Your relationships? Your sleep? That answer tells you whether you have an income problem or a fixed life problem. I know a couple who hit that "we made it" phase in their late 30s. New title at work, nicer neighborhood, the kind of weekends that look calm from the outside. Brunch, a quick trip, we deserved this energy. And then their kid needed something unexpected. Not a catastrophe, just one of those normal life things that costs about $1,000 faster than your brain can process it. And what shocked me wasn't that they were stressed, it was the speed. Like the whole vibe in their house changed in a day. They weren't talking about the expense. They were talking about who to call, what to delay, which account to rob, what lie to tell themselves so they could sleep. That's the part people don't understand about money after 35. It's not that you suddenly become bad with money. It's that your life becomes heavier. More people rely on you. More things have to keep working. And you have less tolerance for chaos, because chaos now has a schedule. School, work, family, health, mortgage, deadlines. So the stakes change. When you're younger, you can do the "I'll figure it out later" thing, and it mostly works because your life is flexible. You can move, you can pivot, you can eat cereal for dinner, and nobody calls it a crisis. After 35, flexibility gets replaced by responsibility. And responsibility is expensive. And here's where I'm going to be a little rude on purpose. The system loves this. Banks love fixed payments. Subscription companies love set it and forget it. Employers love workers with a mortgage, a car payment, and zero runway, because those people don't negotiate hard and they don't leave. So when you feel that constant low-grade pressure, that's not you being weak. That's you being predictable. That's why this decade decides everything. Because this is the decade where a lot of people finally start making real money and then accidentally build a life that requires it. Not wants it, requires it. And once your baseline becomes expensive, every decision you make has a tax attached to it. I watched my neighbor do the responsible adult thing in his late 30s. New title at work, slightly nicer car, a place that felt like he'd finally arrived. And from the outside, it looked clean, like the plan was working. Then his kid needed a specialist appointment, his hours got cut for a couple months, and suddenly this guy, who everyone thought was doing great, was selling stuff on Facebook Marketplace like it was his second job. Not because he was dumb, not because he was reckless, because he didn't have margin. And that's the first insight people miss about the decade after 35. The thing that decides whether you get rich isn't your income. It's your fixed life. Here's the myth. If I can just make more, it'll all be fine. And sure, more income helps. But after 35, life has this way of absorbing raises like a sponge. You don't even notice it happening because it doesn't feel like splurging. It feels like adulthood. You upgrade the apartment because you need space. You upgrade the car because you need reliability. You say yes to the trip, the activities, the little conveniences, because you're tired and you've earned it. And none of those decisions feel like a mistake. They feel like a normal life. But normal is where people get trapped, because every normal upgrade is a new monthly rule you have to follow. And once you have enough of those rules, your life stops being a life. It becomes a machine that needs feeding. So yeah, if you're over 35 and you feel like you should be doing better, you're not crazy. You're not broken. You're noticing the real game. And in a second, I'm going to show you the math that humiliates the myth. One simple breakdown. No spreadsheets, just reality. I know a couple who did what everyone tells you to do after your mid-30s. They got serious. They got the nicer place, the safer neighborhood, the newer car because we're not kids anymore. They stacked a few subscriptions on top because, honestly, they were exhausted and convenience felt like oxygen. And from the outside, it looked like they were finally winning. But inside the house, the vibe was different. Every decision had teeth. Because after 35, you don't just spend money. You pre-spend your future. You sign up for payments that don't care if you're tired or sick, or your boss changes, or your kid needs something, or your parent's situation gets complicated. And this is the belief that keeps people stuck. If I can just earn more, I'll be fine. Here's the math that humiliates that belief. Let's say your upgrade isn't a yacht. It's just $350 a month in small stuff that feels reasonable. a little more housing, a little more car, a little more convenience, a little more we deserve it. $350 a month is $4,200 a year. Over 10 years, that's $42,000. Not theoretical, not in a spreadsheet. That's real cash you burned to keep a baseline you now call normal. And emotionally, $42,000 is not money. It's options. It's months where you can breathe. It's the ability to say no to a job that's slowly poisoning your mood. It's the buffer that turns a surprise expense into an annoyance instead of a family meeting. And this is why I'll just earn more fails so many people in their late 30s and early 40s, especially the ones who look successful. Because they don't use raises to buy freedom, they use raises to buy a more expensive version of the same stress. And it gets worse, because it's not just the money, it's the timing. At 28, a mistake is a lesson. You can move, you can pivot, you can sleep on someone's couch if it gets weird. At 38, you can't pivot out of a mortgage, a commute, a school district, family obligations, and a lifestyle your brain now considers normal. So when people say, I'll just earn more, what they really mean is, I'm going to outrun fixed costs with willpower. That's not a plan. That's a prayer. And this is why the decade after 35 decides everything. Your margin stops being extra. It becomes your ability to breathe. So before we even talk about investing or side hustles or any of that, you have to answer one brutal question. Is your life designed to absorb stress or to amplify it? Because the people who get rich in this decade aren't always the ones who earn the most. They're the ones who keep their margin when life gets heavy. Let that sink in. And here's insight number 3, and it's the one that makes people mad because it doesn't feel fair. The myth is, once you're established, you can relax. You've earned comfort. And yeah, emotionally, I get it. You did the grind. You did the late nights. You did the, I'll deal with it later years. But mathematically, after 35, comfort doesn't behave like a reward. It behaves like a contract. Because your brain adapts. Humans normalize everything. The nicer car becomes the car. The bigger place becomes home. The weekend trip becomes, we needed that. And once it's normal, going backward doesn't feel like a choice. It feels like failure. So what happens is you don't just buy nicer things. You buy a higher baseline, a new minimum. And that new minimum charges interest in the form of stress. Because in your 20s, you can make a dumb month disappear by eating cheap, working extra, crashing at a friend's place, picking up some random gig, whatever. After 35, your life is heavier. Your calendar is full. Your body's a little less forgiving. Your obligations are real. And your flexibility is suddenly a luxury item. So when that contract gets signed, your margin doesn't just shrink. It hardens. It becomes fixed. And that's the part nobody understands until they feel it. When your fixed costs rise, you don't need a catastrophe to break you. You just need a normal inconvenience. A car thing, a family thing, a health thing, a job thing. Not dramatic, just life. And this is where "I'll just make more money" becomes the most expensive sentence in your vocabulary. Because raises don't usually create margin in this decade. They get pre-spent. New expectations show up like clockwork. A nicer neighborhood, better schools, more convenience, more subscriptions, more "we deserve it." Then you're right back where you started. Except now the stakes are higher. Here's the simplest way to see it without a spreadsheet. If your lifestyle creeps up by a few hundred a month, that doesn't feel like a big decision. It feels like a handful of small ones. But over years, that small becomes the difference between investing consistently and constantly catching up. Between being able to walk away from a bad job and having to negotiate with panic in your throat. Between feeling like an adult and feeling like you're one email away from chaos. So the real truth of 35 plus is this. You don't stay stuck because you didn't work hard enough. You stay stuck because you made your life too expensive to pivot. And once your life can't pivot, wealth becomes optional. Because opportunity only pays people who can say yes without blowing up their entire month. So here's the practical system for your late 30s and 40s. And it's not sexy. It's not 10 streams of income. It's not a vision board. It's a margin defense protocol. Because after 35, the thing that kills wealth isn't one big mistake. It's the fact that your life becomes a machine that demands the same amount of cash every month just to keep the lights on and your identity intact. Not because you're dumb, because you're tired. And tired people buy relief. So this system has one goal. Make your life cheaper to operate without making it feel like punishment. Here's how it works. First, you pick a number you can protect no matter what. Not a percent, a floor. Your do not touch margin. For most people, it's a few hundred a month. Small enough to be realistic, big enough to matter. Because that money isn't savings, it's decision power. It's the difference between taking a meeting from a place of calm and taking it like you're begging. Second, you separate your spending into two categories, fixed pride and true needs. Fixed pride is anything you pay for because it makes you feel like an adult who has it together. The upgraded car payment, the "we deserve this" subscriptions, the nicer place because you didn't want to feel behind. It's not evil, it's just expensive. And the problem is, fixed pride becomes permanent. It turns into your new normal. And then it starts charging you interest in the form of stress. True needs are boring. Housing, food, insurance. Stuff you'd still pay for even if nobody saw your life. Your job is to shrink fixed pride until your margin floor is automatic. Third, you do a future shock check before you add any new monthly commitment. You ask one question. If my income dropped for a while, would this payment turn into panic? If the answer is yes, it's not affordable. It's just currently possible. That's the mirage. Fourth, you build a pivot buffer. Not for retirement, for flexibility. This is money that exists specifically so you can say yes to opportunity or no to nonsense. A certification, a move, a short gap between jobs, a plane ticket because your mom needs you. Not glamorous, but it prevents the moment where life forces you into the worst possible decision because you're out of time and out of cash. And yeah, this is where people get uncomfortable, because it means admitting something. Your problem isn't that you don't know what to do. Your problem is you've been living like stability is guaranteed. It's not. At 35 plus, getting rich is mostly about becoming hard to corner. That's the game. That's the system. And my neighbor's story doesn't end with some magical raise that makes the anxiety go away. It ends the way most people's stories end in this decade. Either he keeps the contract, keeps the life that requires him to keep winning forever, and he spends his late 30s and 40s managing pressure, or he breaks it, protects his margin, and suddenly he can breathe again. Because after 35, money stops being about, can I afford it? It becomes, what does this force me to tolerate? A boss who knows you can't quit? A commute you hate because moving is too expensive? A relationship with debt where you're always a little behind, even on your best month? That's the mirage. You look successful, your life looks upgraded, but your freedom is downgraded. And yeah, people will argue with this. They'll say, Ben, I'm not trying to be rich, I just want a normal life. Cool, but normal now costs more than expected. And it's not just the spending, it's the permanence of the spending. The second your fixed costs eat your buffer, you don't have a financial plan anymore. You have a hope and pray strategy. Here's your homework. It's not complicated, it's just uncomfortable. Tonight, take 15 minutes and find your sleep number. The amount of cash or immediately available money you'd need to cover a month where life gets messy. Not an apocalypse, just a month that hurts. If that number is currently not much, don't shame yourself. Just tell the truth. Then do one thing that increases margin without requiring motivation. One automatic move. One downgrade you can live with. One bill you delete. One commitment you renegotiate. Because nobody's coming to save you. Not your employer, not the market, not your family. The system works exactly as intended. It's just not intended to work for you. This decade decides if you get rich or stay stuck. Not because you didn't hustle hard enough, because you either kept your margin or you sold it to feel comfortable. You're in the decade where money stops being math and starts being weight. This isn't about budgeting. It's about how your life quietly